Welcome back. You're watching the Entrepreneurial Edge. I'm Chris Bishiop. Now follow us on Twitter for show updates. Our handle is EntrePEdge. Plus you can email us on entrep@abn360.com. Now still in the studio with me I have Sisa Ngebulana, the chairman of the Billion Group, which is a property company. So once you'd finished your original varsity, then you went to Cape Town to study and do your articles in law.
Yes.
Which is not too surprising, but then you still had the entrepreneurial bug after that. Where did you turn next to make?
Yeah, funny enough, my grandmother, I used to argue a lot with her because I used to drive her up and down, and she said, "I'm going to become a lawyer," and I became a lawyer. And I think it was, I think old people sometimes have insights that we never know in our lifetime. So it was a blessing in disguise because I think the law is become so helpful in my life. So I did articles with a law firm called Johannesburg-based in Cape Town. I did mostly specialize in commercial litigation. I handled the master bond matters and a couple of other matters at the time. And then while I was doing my articles, because you're not allowed to actually to do anything else while you do articles until you do your board exams and qualify as an attorney. So I then had my car, which I couldn't afford to pay for insurance and so on, because I was getting 800 Rand a month. And then I then got a tow bar for the car, and I started transporting people from Greenpoint to Sea Point, flat to flat and that sort of thing, until I invested in a truck, and then I had a couple of trucks, and then I came to Joburg, leaving law, and then I had some contracts for horse and trail trucks, and at a point that didn't go well, and I had to sell those. In fact, I had 3 blackouts week after week. Took my appendix out, and then kidney stones, whole range of things, and then I realized, I've got to get rid of what the core problem was. So I sold those trucks in auction, owed some money to the banks, and I had to find a job. And I went to Eskom. They were one of my clients when I was in practice, and they gave me a job. And I worked for Eskom for about 7 years.
As a corporate lawyer?
As a corporate lawyer, rising from junior to senior to chief legal advisor. And just before I left, I specialized in finance. Before I left Eskom, in fact, during that time, I did my master's in finance as well. And then before I left, I spent some time for about 2 years in their treasury. I traded money markets, capital markets, became part of the structured and project finance. And then I left Eskom. I started doing,
This is another tight turn, isn't it? Because you've been a lawyer, and then you went into trucking, then you went to Eskom, the national power generator, and then you went into the coal business. Is that right?
Yes. So what had happened actually is I had to do something to pay back the banks for my trucking business.
Necessity being the mother of invention.
Yes, exactly. So I did spec building, largely in Kalami Estate and then Dainfern. And I was able to pay that over a 3-year period of all the profits that I could make out of the spec building of homes. And then after, I had some surplus cash I had made out of that, and I had a 5-year plan when I went to Eskom. But I ended up spending about 7 years. And then I left Eskom. When I left, actually, there's a listed company, which was Century Carbon. It was listed in the JSE, which had been suspended from trading because one of its subsidiary companies, Capital Coal at the time, had not paid its creditors. So these fellows came to me. I was good in structuring. I looked at the deal, and I realized if I recapitalize the company, they can go back on their feet and trade. I had to do a 311 compromise with the creditors, and I delisted the company and then recapitalized it with a few banks, and it started operating again. But I wasn't full-time in the company. So I was just I was the largest shareholder at 42%, with the banks taking the other balance. Needless to say, it didn't last for about 18 months. It had core issues of roof falls and a whole range of things which we couldn't. And then the coal prices were also depressed because our coal contracts were fixed to the spot prices. So it became quite a nightmare because the spot price moved so low that it was below our actually operating cost.
But the coal business is tough anyway. I mean, you've got problems with moving the coal, you've got problems with extracting it sometimes with the people who own the land, you've got problems with regulations, environmental. How difficult did you find it?
No, it wasn't an easy business. I employed professionals who had been running that company. I had restructured the company, so I had different people in certain areas. But yes, it was a tough business, not an easy business, particularly if, there's certain factors that are beyond you, particularly if your pricing is linked to sports pricing. Because it doesn't matter how good you are with your operations. When things go wrong, which are external factors, they influence your business. And we see that throughout Resources. I think Platinum is in that exactly same situation at the moment. So I then made a resolve when I wrapped up that business and sold those assets, and I lost all the money that I'd put into it, and it actually forced me out of employment, because at the time I was still employed. And it's one of those things, you never know when's the right time to leave employment. But it was actually a blessing in disguise, because of the crisis that was there, I decided to leave employment so I can focus on that business and be full-time in it. And it was hardly 6 months I decided to wrap up the business, and we wrapped it up. We sold everything on auctions and so on and so on. And beyond that, I was there without a job, without anything. I was back to square one. I was actually below zero because I owed money to the banks again.
But it seems to me that your business, you've been plagued by this problems with things not quite turning out. You've had health problems, you said. Yeah. Was there ever a time when you were absolutely in despair, you thought of throwing up the idea of being an entrepreneur?
I think at that point in time, actually after the coal experience, I was exactly at that point. I have had other points in my life beyond that where, I've had to think twice about that. And sometimes I've had to even look back at my experiences and think, if I knew what I know now in terms of what experiences I would have gone through, would I have left employment and become an entrepreneur? Probably not, because people just don't tell you these sort of things. But I think with a bit of guidance, I could have avoided quite a lot of things. And that's why sometimes it's important for aspiring entrepreneurs, to spend some time with people who've been there and been around.
Do you have this desire to sort of help the next generation?
I have that innate desire. In fact, I've got quite a lot of programs in place that we're planning to assist people, especially within my sector, because what we do in our sector, I know it like back of my hand. And I guide currently quite a lot of young entrepreneurs who, come across my desk, send me emails, SMSs, and so on and so on. And the best way to guide somebody is through if they have something that they need to deal with, other than just general guidance, because general guidance sometimes is meaningless unless somebody has something that they're confronting they need solutions to.
But now you're riding high, you're a big company in the property game, well established. But property has not been very easy over the last few years.
Yeah.
How have you found it? Has it been another one of your little hurdles to get over?
Chris, I started off, I think, I mentioned that my coal thing was quite one of the toughest things I've ever been involved in. I wrapped up that, and just luckily I had one plot of land, which I then decided to focus on. And I was able to develop concepts, and I was able to sell off-plan 4 units in Hyde Park. And really, that's really what picked me up from that. And obviously, I hustled the banks to be able to give me an overdraft so that I could live until I could completely finish the project. And thereafter, then I was able to get more clusters. I did more clusters in Hyde Park, Bryanston, and a couple of areas. So I started off in residential properties. And beyond that, I then started investing in some commercial properties, particularly in CBDs. And I focused on Pretoria CBD at the time because the insurance companies were moving out of CBDs. So the yields they were selling at were actually, I tell people I bought properties at 25% yields. Today, if you get a property at 11% yield, you're very lucky. So, so there was a lot of equity. You could make deals work those days. And I think it was a blessing. I was just there at the right time, at the right place. Yeah, I bought a few of those properties, high-rise buildings, mostly in Pretoria CBD, and then after, I focused on retail. I've developed regional shopping malls, and I've had my lessons, But we specialize in retail. We listed, so we accumulated a lot of assets, which either we developed or we bought, and we then consolidated. I consolidated those assets in 2010 into a company called Rebosis, which is made up of family names. And then beyond that, I then listed Rebosis last year on the main JSE board on the 17th of May last year. And we've delivered to focus since we listed. And Rebosis, I'd like to think, is one of the most attractive counters at the moment in the market.
Is this it for you? You think you found your niche in the entrepreneurial world? You seem to have survived the property game. Do you have any great desires to go dashing off to the Eastern Cape maybe or wherever to do something completely different?
Yeah, I think for now, Chris, I still have age at my disposal. So I've had a lot of challenges from my family to health to a whole range of things, which I could spend the day on. But lessons I've taken from that is you look after yourself. You exercise, you eat well. I'm in great shape.
Rugby player, as you said.
Yeah, I played rugby all my life, but I tend to spend a lot of time with my boys playing squash at home, running, and that sort of thing. So we do quite a lot of that, and I teach them the value of healthy eating, healthy habits, exercise, and so on and so on.
And on the entrepreneurial front, is there anybody who's well, shall we say, you mentioned your grandfather, obviously, but anyone else who's an entrepreneur that you look up to?
I read about a few entrepreneurs. And I must say, I'm not a novel reader as such. Because I'm a lawyer, I was trained to study a document, and I try and remember. And sometimes when you read novels, you don't need to remember. You just need to remember the gist of the story. But it's kind of hard for me because I'm trained to study and remember, court cases and the judge and everything else. So with that in mind, I don't read a lot of those. But I think Steve Jobs done quite a lot of good work, and I think coming to our country, there's quite a lot of good entrepreneurs out there who really have set the trends.
In Africa,
Rupert's, and Maponia's, and a couple of and also in the rest of the continent. So I take inspiration sometimes just reading about their stories and so on and so on. But I think in my mind, my grandfather lives on as the biggest icon in my life. And maybe I'm biased because he's my family and he made me. I'm who I am because of him. I've got a lot of resonance with who he was, to remain humble, to stay out of public spectra and just focus in what you need to focus on. My business and my family, and that's it. And my kids.
And how would you like people to remember you? We'll talk about you in the future as an entrepreneur.
I think certainly in the property space, if I look at what we've achieved as a business, it's not about the money. It's about leaving a legacy of having created some of the iconic structures in this country, some of the best malls in this country. And I think having contributed to a large extent, we have a massive social program. I've built schools, I've built church, we contribute to a lot of social causes which cover a range of activities in a range of townships and so on and so on. So,
Sisa Ngebulana, the Executive Chairman of the Billion Group, thank you very much for sharing your wonderful stories and your time. I'm sure you're not finished yet as an entrepreneur, far from it.